Vic and Vicki Coggins are our guests today. And I just learned today that they beat me here by 6 years. They were here in 1965 when Vic was a student in wildlife at Oregon State University, and they came up and did a couple summers here, including, Vicki said, a nice survey of the high lakes. What a good thing for a young couple to be able to do. Get paid for it? God almighty. Anyway, and then Vic went on to a 50-year career with, in wildlife management here. And then he spent the last, I think he'd been collecting pictures and taking notes for those 50 years. And then the last 4 or 5 been putting it together, right? Seriously? So he's ended up with a book that Jerry Gildermeister helped him with. If you guys remember Jerry, who did the book Traces and the Rendezvous book and what's the one of the Cat's Back? Cat's Back. And then
let's see, the one on Columbia.
Oh,
Roll
yeah.
on Columbia.
Yeah, Roll on Columbia, that's right. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm not going to say much more, just to welcome Vic and Vicki. Thank you for coming. He does have the books over there, and you can get them after the talk. And that's it. Thank you very much for coming. And for those of you who didn't know that Steve Arment's carvings are around here, and they'll be up till the end of the month. There's still a few of them for sale. They've been selling, let me tell you.
Well, thanks for the introduction, and thanks for everybody that came. I'll just start out a little bit about the book. It was the hardest undertaking that I've ever been involved with. I was fortunate in that I kept journals for over 50 years, so I could go back to the journal, but still 50 years of journals, you had to find it. You know? And in the slide era, I had kept my slides in pretty good order, but when digital came along, it all fell apart because I didn't understand most of it. Whoops, I just went by. I don't know how to reverse this.
I guess I should have stood.
I'm from another era.
Remember, we used to have those slide projectors. You could put the slides
Well,
in.
before that, you just had a light in your hand. Okay, that's a view of Vicki and I were hunting quail in southeast Arizona. So this was still when the book was in progress. That's kind of good for There we go. This is kind of in 3 sections, the book is, and it starts out with my early life, and I was raised in southern Oregon, in the Rogue Valley, so it starts out down there, and some of my old character relatives, but we always had horses, used horses, and that was one of the reasons I got the job up here, is because I could pack some, although I learned to do it a lot better after I was here. But we did all of the old surveys, the deer and elk surveys were done horseback or on foot in the old days, so I spent a lot of time packing. We also used to have interagency trips with the Forest Service and other groups, so I did end up packing for them. We were fortunate in my first summer I spent, Vicki and I spent about 3 weeks in the Laos doing high lake surveys. And so that's a view Vicky on my old horse that came from actually the old Klamath Indian Reservation. This was one of the characters in the family, and he died, Uncle George is what we all knew him as, but he died the year I was born, so I didn't ever know him other than the many, many stories. And that is an Applegate, Oregon, Southern Oregon bear that he raised from a cub and taught it to roller skate. And would also wrestle, and he literally toured the East Coast and Europe and made, for that day and time, a fortune off of that bear. So I grew up hearing stories. Her name was Alice Teddy. Hearing stories of Alice Teddy. We also, my family had a cabin in the Southern Cascades, and that picture is of me with the rifle, and I put it in there because you can see that scope. You know, I think it was probably my old uncle was pretty good at taking some kind of war surplus and being innovative with it, and I think that was probably where it came from. But at that time, there were very few scoped rifles. Most people had 30-30s or 44-40s or the old Winchesters that hunted. And anyway, that cabin was one of the focal points in our lives. We spent a lot of time there. Then in 1965, I went to work up here in the summers, and then I moved out to Corvallis and go to school in the wintertime. Of course, that's just a view of Wallowa County, and that was my district, was Wallowa County, although I did stray into Idaho and Washington quite a bit. Wow. That first summer, another part of the duties was doing stream surveys in Joseph Canyon, and that was in August. And we did it on foot, so hiking in and out of there was a real ordeal. Of course, it was hot and dry, and all of the rattlesnakes that go to water, and so you had the crick noise, and there were, I mean, rattlesnakes are abundant down there, but it was an interesting place. There were old homesteads that looked like the people that just walked out the door. And so it was very interesting duty. We saw a lot of wildlife too. Then, as I said, we got to go for the respites up in the Eagle Cap, and the lake surveys were physical surveys. You sounded the lake with an old hand line. Ice Lake is about 200 feet deep, and so that's a lot of line to take in and out. There's another chapter on the Cherry Creek Sheep Ranch that belonged to the Gus Malaxa and Joe Onandia, Basque people, and we'd go in and stay with them for 3 or 4 days every winter and do our surveys, our horseback surveys. Some of you know Ron Bartels, and that was Ron in his younger days as we were in Lower Omaha, we were headed into the Cherry Creek. And Joe and Gus would entertain us at night with all kinds of stories. Sometimes they'd forget we didn't understand Basco, but we did a lot of arm waving, and we could usually get to the bottom of whatever we were discussing. That's a view of the old ranch. If it's totally gone, you wouldn't even know that there was anything there now. It burnt in some of the numerous fires. That old red pickup there was their total equipment, any power equipment, that was it. Then they had horses and mules. Spent a lot of time in Hell's Canyon. We had, of course, survey routes all around. You can look there, that's the Eagle's Nest. And I know some of you in this room have been there. And that's the horse and rider and pack animal there. This was kind of a interesting trip. It was an interagency trip with the Umatilla Forest in the Wanaha country. They had leased these mules, and this one was, they got stung off. Anyway, we lost a horse off the trail, and it came down to either that they were leading that mule without anything on it because they had so much trouble. Anyway, we either had to, somebody walk and pack a saddle horse or saddle that mule, and a couple of us had something against leading that mule that was empty. So we started working with him, but he was really a nasty animal. I had to put my old jean jacket over his head because his bad habits were he bit, kicked, struck, and if he'd have chewed tobacco, I'm sure he would have spit tobacco. But anyway, we got him wrestled down, trussed up, saddled, and finally got the load on him. And then one of us got a good dally on the saddle horse, and by the time we got him 10 miles up to the next camp, he was pretty gentled down. I've got another chapter on airplanes because I spent a huge amount of time doing aerial surveys with Ted Grote for a few years, and then he sold to Bud Stangl and Bud for many years, and Joe Spence until they changed the procedure a few years ago. So years of flying adventures. I was fortunate to have such good pilots. Some of the others that I flew law enforcement with were not as good. So there's some stories about that there. We threw this one in because this is the modern way of catching a lot of wildlife species, and I thought this was an outstanding picture that one of the guys took of a net going down over a bunch of bighorns in the Wanaha. And this just revolutionized large animal capture. Spent a lot of time on the Snake River in jet boats, and before that in power boats, outboards, which anytime you went up the river, you never knew whether you were really going to make it or not. But power boats. The jet boats just changed that. I mean, you can still have trouble, but not like the old days of the outboards.
So when did the jet boats come in?
Probably we got ours in the in the 90s.
Really? That late?
Yeah, maybe a little earlier. We did a lot of hunter patrols. I mean, a huge amount. I would spend September, October, and November usually doing mostly law enforcement. So we had check stations out in the Chestnut country, and actually one year checked through almost 5,000 hunters there. And at that point in time, there were about 17,000 elk hunters that came into Wallowa County mostly at the same time. The standing joke that I know some of you remember is you had to wait till the light changed in Portland before you could get across the street. And the big battle was trying to reduce the numbers of hunters out in those areas and get some semblance of bull survival. And we did that over time, but it was a major undertaking. We did a lot of, in earlier times, we did a lot of horse patrols. That's the lower Minam. We do a combination of law enforcement and game surveys. That was on the Minam. So I recall we'd have temperatures that time down to 0 or so. So you'd ride as far as you could up those trails and then stop and get off and build a fire and warm up and then go on. That's, some of you know, that's Dean Harrison there, one of the old game wardens I started working with. The other view, my old horse that I brought to the country at Polaris Pass. At that time, you could still get a horse through there, although never was a real good trail. Then I've got a series of all the big game animals that are found now in Wallowa County and ones that were extirpated. And there's a section on mule deer and talks about the big decline in mule deer here, other than Vicky and Joseph in the valley. But the backcountry is just has a very low density of mule deer. It's a view. This is fairly recent Sled Springs bucks out in the Paradise Country. It's a canola field there in the background. Whitetails are, as some of you know, are very abundant in this valley and have expanded greatly in my time. When I first started, there were whitetails. Whoops, I just hit the hair trigger again. Anyway, there were whitetails that were in the Wanaha country and a few on the East Moraine and in the valley, but were not very many. And now they're abundant, and I think they'll continue to move into some of the other flatter country. They don't seem to like the steep country except in the spring when it greenes up. They'll move into the steep country. That's a mistake there. That should be Dotson family bucks, Dale Dotson's family, and some of the bucks they took in the Omaha unit, Upper Prairie Creek, and the buck quality has dropped some as people have gone on to hunting them more. But anyway, this chapter's got some numbers and population estimates, and it goes back to historically there were a few found in Wanaha and settlement times. You want to see whitetails, and anybody that lives here knows this, but you can just drive around in the evening around the valley roads, and you'll see plenty. Bighorns. I spent an awful lot of time working on bighorn restoration. Bighorns were totally extirpated. They did last in the Wallowas until probably about 1940 in small numbers, and then they disappeared. And we started the reintroduction program in 1971. Of course, being a young biologist, I was really excited about them. Had I known what was coming, I might not have been quite as excited, because they just have a tremendous problem with disease. This is the famous old ram we called Spot, and he was pretty old then, but he wasn't like you would get. He ended up blind in one eye, and he was one of the first that died in the disease epidemic in 1986.
How old was he when he died?
He was 14.
14.
That was the second introduction, the one that started the Lost Dean herd. And they came from Alberta in that horse truck. And that's a Silver Creek burn, which has changed a lot. Most of those trees are down. Wallowa County is just well blessed with tremendous bighorn habitat. And we've probably got about 700 bighorns, now Rocky Mountain bighorns in Oregon. And they are just found in Wallowa and Baker counties. That's just, that lower Omaha country is just outstanding, but then so is Joseph Creek and a lot of the Hell's Canyon it is from really Lookout Mountain to Lewiston. The Lost Dean herd has been used for a lot of research and as a source for a lot of transplants in both Washington and Idaho as well. We did a lot of early work on lungworm control, and to do that, you put drugs in pellets and feed them pretty regularly, and it will take out the lungworms. But we also found at that time lungworms were considered one of the reasons that they got the pneumonia, but we found out that they would still get pneumonia, that it came from a bacteria that was in domestic sheep and goats. And they just couldn't cope with it, kind of like the Native Americans couldn't cope with a lot of the diseases Europeans brought in. There's been a tremendous amount of research done at Washington State University, and it's still going on, and we've made really great progress. But some of you have been up to the Lostine, and you know how tame they are. Lambs are the reason that a lot of these sheep herds aren't doing good. This bacteria can be carried by the mother to cross over into the lambs. The mother has some immunity, and the other animals in the herd. This bacteria is the smallest bacteria known. Mycoplasma pneumoniae is the culprit, and it went undetected for many years because it was grew really slow on their conventional auger plates, and so it wasn't until genetic techniques came about that they were able to figure out what it was and how prevalent it was. But anyway, those lambs looked pretty healthy, but they were carrying mycoplasma, and so just that year, virtually all the lambs died at the Lostine from disease. Mountain goats, it's a chapter on mountain goats. When I first started here, we had about 20 or 30 animals in the Wallowas, and that was all the goats in Oregon. They were also considered non-native at that time, but we did a lot of research on archaeological digs and early trapper reports and stuff like that, and found out, yeah, they were native all through northeast Oregon, all the way down the Cascades. This is at Hat Point, which is just a classically good mountain goat habitat. In fact, the state record came from just south of there. This was an early study, one of the early studies we did here. That's Mike Vaughn, who did his master's on wild mountain goats, and kind of confirmed that, yeah, we only had about 20 or 30 goats up there. And they came from about 5 animals, and so they were badly inbred. And I think then we had some hunting seasons in the 60s that almost annihilated them. And so that, I'm sure we had a genetic bottleneck that was affecting them. In fact, one of my old pilots, I'll tell this story quickly, one of my old pilots, Ted Grote, always said, oh, we need to put some more goats in there, and everybody kind of scoffed at him. And he lived long enough that I got to tell him, yeah, you were right, Ted. So, that's a very large male goat right there. They're a little bit hard to tell apart. We were just at there's a mandatory class for anybody that gets a goat tag to try to encourage them to shoot males. And because they can be a little hard to tell. But anyway, that guy is a trophy male at the Salt Lick at Hat Point. Rocky Mountain elk. We spent a huge amount of time working on elk. And elk are probably can be one of the, well, wolves a lot too, for controversy, but they're definitely can be one of the more controversial, especially when they're get into ag land. They have a habit of getting the word out. And we start out with 4 or 5 elk, and pretty soon you got 100. But we do have this world-class elk habitat in this county, and lots of backcountry for them to be in too. And that's down on the Grand Ronde River. That was during the rut, and that bull was cooling off there. I started out working on one of the first elk studies in Wallowa County, and that was out in the Chestnut, because that was the herd we were having all the trouble with at that time. And we didn't have radio collars in those days, didn't have much money to do anything with, so we used whatever we had, which was haystack panels for the trap, baited it with salt, and that collar right there is a sight collar, and we would end up reading those out of the Super Cup. And if I'd have had anybody other than Bud Stangl, I might not have tried it, but one day I said, Bud, do you think we can read those collars? Because we were counting elk. And he said, well, I believe we can. So you have to have the utmost faith in your pilot, because you have to be glued to that collar to see that number. But we did. We were able to read most of them. And got a lot of information on elk movements from it. Elk calves, in the old days, we would run about 45 calves per 100 cows when we did our surveys. In modern times, it's if you have 25, it's really good. And they're really impacted by cougar predation and probably going to be by wolf predation too. But we still are pretty healthy herds, and we have better bull ratios than we've ever had. Pronghorns, there was pretty sketchy information on pronghorns being here, and you look at some of the old range maps and they're absent, but I knew Grace Bartlett well, and I'd always tell her when she was going through things, if she ever seen anything on wildlife, let me know. And so she found a diary that actually had one of the guys that shot a pronghorn. And then I know there were some that survived out around the buttes, but Zumwalt Prairie is really good pronghorn habitat. And we did have some visit here a few years ago. I think they came probably from over around halfway, but they went through here and went all the way up out of Clarkston in Washington. And then all of a sudden they came back by, and I saw them out there by Midway one day, three bucks. And then they disappeared. I assume they went back. But I do think we have some really good habitat for them. Moose, got a chapter on moose, and talks about some of the numbers now. But anyway, we would get moose reports in the 70s, but there'd be a bull in one part of the Snake River unit and a cow somewhere else, but never together. And finally, in the late 1900s or early 2000s, we started having some calves born. And we think they probably came in from Moscow, Idaho, Pullman area, across that grain land, or in the Blue Mountains. We probably have 60 or 70 moose now. But it looks like to me they're being impacted by the Wanaha wolf pack too, so there doesn't seem to be an increase in like they should. Pat Matthews was my assistant, took my place when I retired with a net gun moose. That takes strong young net gunners. Because those moose are on prod. When you handle them like that, take them out of the net, they're on the fight. And the snow's deep too. Another one that, Grace wrote about it. Grace Bartlett wrote about it, and so did Josephy, about bison in this area. And I found a reference from Spalding, who was a missionary for the Nez Perce in 1830s, that there, and I'm sure he got this from tribal people, is that there were some herds of bison that moved into the Grand Ronde Valley in the 30s and 40s. And my theory is, I think they came out of the Wallowas, that they were able to survive in the Wallowas because of the rugged country. And of course, tree line, there was a lot more alpine grassland in those days, alpine country. And they can live in some pretty harsh conditions like they do in Yellowstone. And anyway, there's at least 3 or 4 skulls and a couple archaeological digs that have bison bones in them. And it dawned on me one day, I spent a long time on the Zumwalt Prairie, and there was these little marshes that you see. They're only in the spring. They're up on top of the ridges. And if you walk into them, there's no rocks there. And then I got to thinking and reading and talking to some guys that knew about bison, and they said, well, it sure could be buffalo wallows. And so I think they are, but I of course can't say for sure. Cougar, when I grew up in Southern Oregon, they were just about gone from there. They'd been bounty hunted, and of course I hunted with hounds, and so that was the ultimate hound trophy, was cougar, especially as scarce as they were at that time. Anyway, we had a closed season for a while on cougars. It was in the 60s, and then the very first hunting season started here in Wallowa County, because we had the rugged country that they survived in. And we had very restricted seasons in those days, although you could use hounds, but it was just very limited tags, and everything had to be checked in at the Department or State Police Office. Anyway, we overachieved and ended up with a lot of cougars in Oregon. And then dogs were taken away by an initiative petition, and so it left us with not having the most effective tool for harvesting cats and controlling them. We do have a liberal season year-round and 2 tags. But it's still, they are very secretive animals, they're very interesting animals, and they can be really hard on, especially mule deer and elk. One of the old stories is the very first cat that I was involved in taking out of a bobcat trap was a big old male, and it was up Bear Creek, and the guys that had caught him were pretty good woodsmen, so we just roped that cat, choked it down, took it out of the trap. Then we had to let him keep the rope. Nobody wanted to go take the rope off his neck. But anyway, my supervisor, Bill Brown, said, well, you guys should have got some publicity on that. So the next one we got was in a trap at Wallowa, and the people were just frantic. It was up by Stratford's Pond, and so we decided, well, we've got to just move it out of here. And it was a young female. That was kind of a hard luck cat because it had been shot too on top of it and healed up. But that's one of our old department toolboxes that was in the back for pickup. So anyway, we dutifully took the cat down to the chieftain office in Enterprise. And fortunately, it didn't get away, and we ended up taking it out and turning it loose in Frotty Creek. Cougar kittens are really cute, most young animals are, but cougar kittens are really cute.
Yeah.
Wow.
But you can see those claws, they can scratch. And I was involved with the first wolves that came. In fact, that was the very first chapter that I wrote for that book, so it had to be heavily edited by because my bitterness showed. Anyway, that's the very first, the old female that was responsible for wolves going to a lot of places in Oregon, and the population or the pair attack in Northern California as well. I called her broken tooth because she had broken teeth. And Russ Morgan caught her in the trap and called me one morning, I need some help. And so we put that new collar on her. She had an old one. She was from Idaho, from Boise Forest, and had moved here. I put that thing on there pretty tight, and Russ said, well, you're getting that pretty tight. Well, I said, she won't eat so much. But really, a tight collar is a safe collar. They won't hang themselves. We had those camera traps all around, and they got some excellent pictures like that wolf pup there. Black bear, I got a pretty good person. I always had a soft spot for bears because of my old uncle. And, I don't think that one had learned to roller skate. But anyway, that's a classic Snake River bear right there, a cinnamon bear, which is the rarest color phase in Olalla County. We have 4 different color phases, and browns are the most common, then blacks, then blondes, and then cinnamons. Nothing cuter than a little bear cub, although that one weighed about 5 pounds, as I recall, and he was very well equipped with claws. I think that one of my kids got scratched by him, in fact, holding him. I did a little research on the grizzlies, and of course I knew they were around because I talked to old timers that remembered him, and disappeared in the 30s. One of the last ones was killed at Billy Meadows, and then there was another 2 that were killed in the mine after that, but they weren't as well documented. And that one at Billy Meadows, I had the good fortune of knowing Wade Hall, who was the ranger there at the time. So I got the full story, and it's in the book. And that's the end to it. I got that saying from, there was an old guy, and I think he lived at Promise, although it's been so long ago, but he'd end a sentence. He'd always say end to it when he got done talking. So anyway, that's, if you have any questions, I'd be glad to. Dan?
What's the situation with the amount of goats now?
We have got about 1,000 goats in Oregon now.
Yeah, what about in this area?
Probably we've got 2/3 of them.
Is that right?
There's a real good population. That's all in this book too. It's got every transplant and all the populations the same as the sheep do too. I just thought I ought to record that because stuff has a habit of disappearing. So, but no, we've got goats. If you want to see mountain goats, in fact, I've changed my old opinion on what is goat habitat. From the old days, we thought, well, it'd have to be alpine country because that's what we're familiar with up here. But they love those canyons. The main thing is lots of cliff rock. And we have them now. There's some in the Grand Rock Canyon that live. They're year-round right now, hot, dry canyon. So another little group up in Mama, above town.
Someone told me yesterday that there are babies with the Grand Rock Bio with that.
Yeah, and I've heard that too. There's one along the freeway, or maybe more than one now, by Perry, right across from Perry.
Oh, it
is
is.
there.
They've been there.
You can see 40 from town.
Did you see 40?
Yeah, over 40.
Yeah, on Joseph. Yeah.
The last few days, there's only been a handful. But
Yeah.
There was over 40 one day, lots of lambs.
Yeah, no, they have done pretty darn well since we got figured out that, you have to have some genetic diversity now. we got goats from Alaska and from the Olympic Park and from Idaho, so we've got really diverse genetics now.
So what year was Broken Tooth, did Broken Tooth appear? Do you remember approximately?
It's in there. It was that was the first, she actually had a pup
Yeah.
that first year, and we didn't really know it until some of the dog men were seeing their tracks, and we said, well, there's 3. So, but let's see, I think about 2007 or so, I think, but it's in there. So,
Did you take all these photographs?
took a lot of them, but there are some that were, some Gildemeister had a few in there, Jerry did.
They're wonderful.
So, well, thank you. But we took a lot of them.
Well, why do the whitetails run the mule deer out?
I don't really think they do. I think what happens, and we've got a case history in our fields around the house, and we got mule deer and whitetails there, and they seem to intermingle pretty well, although there's one mule deer doe that's pretty tough. But I think it's more she's just old and tough, and she'll run everything off, but her fawns. But I think they're better at evading predators. And there's a lot of habitats that they don't really go to in any number, well, like the alpine stuff in the mountains, but our mule deer numbers are rock bottom there. Any of the backcountry, Hell's Canyon the same way. Just a few little bunches of whitetails, but not very many. But I just think, people have seen whitetails increase and mule deer go downhill, and so they assumed that it was because of the whitetails.
Vic, what's the disease situation now with the sheep? Is it still precarious?
You never know from year to year. It seems to be pretty good in most herds. The lost team right now is going through a little spell with mycoplasma. In fact, they're one of the major research herds. That they've got some at WSU, and they really like having them there because instead of running when they go in the pen, like other sheep do, they come to them. So it makes it really handy for.
Well, theoretically, the people the sheep with resistance would thrive, and the other ones would die off, and you'd eventually get, wouldn't you?
You would think so, but also this mycoplasma, I asked one of the researchers up there how many different types there were. And he said, well, they found at least 1,000, so you always have the potential for another one to come along.
Yeah.
They do get immune, at least the adults do, to the mycoplasma that's in them. And interestingly, the mycoplasma in all the herds in Hell's Canyon, except Lookout Mountain, is mycoplasma free. It's all the same type. So, but there's just some really interesting research going on right now. After all I went through with all the disease episodes, it's just thrilling for me to see what's going on. Because I think we figured out, what's happening, and then that's the first step, and then what do you do about it? So.
Do you think it's hopeful what's going on now, saving these animals that are numbers?
Yeah, there'll be carriers, and especially the U groups, and then as the lambs come in and the amount of the milk consumption goes down, about 6 weeks to age is usually when it hits them, but not always. Sometimes if it's hotter, it'll hit them earlier, and sometimes it'll go later. But you'll look at the ewes, and usually you can't tell anything wrong with it. It's in their upper respiratory, in their nasal passages, and what it does is it damages the cilia that cleanses the air coming into them. And so, and then they're just super sensitive. I mean, a domestic can get it, and it's not without, you know, it causes them some problems too, but they can survive it. So, but it's just, you know, they were from Europe and Asia, not North America, so.
So Vic, will there be I mean, you were talking about the wolves and the cougars that cut down the elk and mule deer, possibly elk, okay. Is there some kind of a balance figure in there that you see? I mean, how many wolves, how many cougars can we, I know it's gonna fluctuate, but how many can we support, kind of, do you think, realistically?
Well, I think they need to be managed, and that means hunting them. And I think that, you know, you need to have pretty heavy-handed management. In other words, when you get a livestock killer, you take them out. I mean, we did that with cougars. They were never listed, although, you know, if it had been in modern times, they would have been. And we were able to, you know, overachieve on bringing them back. And, you know, we always took them on damage. And, you know, somebody that was having damage could always take them. But I just think it's, you know, that people tend to put wolves, well, all the large carnivores, didn't just wolves, grizzlies, and put them kind of on a pedestal, and they just need to be managed. And I think you can have wolves out there, but you also, you know, you have to have a big prey base for them, and it's not good for them if they cut back on the prey base. And over time, you might have seen, you know, them drop off, you know, their prey drop off, and then them drop off drastically too. But, you know, most people don't want to see that. They want to see more of an even, as best you can with any wild animal, more even flow of animals. So we're going to be around and autographing books if anybody's interested, or if you want to visit some more, we'll be around for a while. So thanks for coming.